Braumiller with Braumiller Law Group. Braumiller Law Group is based out of Dallas, Texas, but we do have offices across the U.S. as well as in Mexico. We focus 100% on import-export, whether it be issues with military or commercial exports, as well as any kind of issues, other federal agency issues related to imports, fish and wildlife, FDA, you name it. We help companies import and export their goods around the world. And with me today is Brad Menard, who's Vice President of Braumiller Consulting.
Right, so we're also based in Dallas, Texas. And what we are is basically a group of subject matter experts that assist attorneys with trying to, get things resolved when it comes to trade compliance. So we do a lot of work with Braumiller Law Group and other law firms as needed.
Braumiller Law Group has been recognized and ranked by chambers and partners now since, I believe, 2015, both in the U.S. and globally. We also partner with various global networks such as IR Global so that we can assist our clients around the globe. So I think the thing that's concerning is that there's a lot of back and forth between the various news media regarding whether or not there will be any kind of finality to this trade war. So one day we think it will be final, the next day we hear, oh, it's not going to be final. So it's really a pendulum that keeps swinging back and forth, and it's hard to really keep track of it. But the one thing that's very good is that there is an opportunity for importers and other interested parties to file what's called an exclusion request. And if they meet the requirements for obtaining an exclusion, they can successfully get a refund of all the duties that they pay, as well as up to a year of avoidance of those tariffs. There were 3 lists. They've been expanded to 4 lists. There are various tranches that the U.S. and China have been fighting over. There's retaliatory duties on the Chinese side in response to the U.S. action. So the first 3 lists covered $250 billion worth of goods. And the very first list where the U.S. Trade Representative reviewed exclusions has finally come to the end of the review by the USTR. Of those, there were roughly 10,000, a little over 10,000 exclusion requests filed. Of those, roughly 3,500 were granted. So it was a 1/3 success rate for people who were willing to, spend the time and money to invest in trying to get an exclusion. On list 2, there were far fewer exclusions that were filed. It was roughly 2,800. However, the success rate was slightly better at about 36%. List 3, actually, I'm really shocked at how quickly the USTR is starting to issue exclusions that are being granted. There's really no stats that I can give on that, but I would think it's still going to be in the 1/3% success. For us, we've been really successful. We're at about 75% on all of our exclusions.
One of the reasons that I think Braumiller Law Group has been successful with the tariff exclusion process is making sure that the arguments are sound, and also that the harmonized tariff schedule classification number that is on the exclusion request is that of the product that we're actually seeking an exclusion for. We've seen several situations where companies use potentially a bucket classification provision, which is very general, and there might be a more specific tariff classification for that item. So that's one of the reasons I think that our exclusions have been successful.
One thing that we notice over and over, regardless of the sophistication of the importer, is they think their tariff classifications are accurate. They always make this assumption, and we usually find that about 1/3 of their tariff classifications are wrong that they've been using. So the key point, if you want to be successful with an exclusion process, is to follow 3 tests. The very first test is you have to show that it's almost impossible to source outside of China. That sounds very daunting, but it's actually easier than you think, because you could say it's not successful or doable because of quality or capacity concerns that other sourcing opportunities may or may not be capable of providing. The second point is whether or not the exclusion request will avert severe economic harm. So you have to have it in order to avoid severe economic harm. And that their very third point or third test is that it's not related to China, Made in China 2025, which is a technological advancement program that China has as an initiative. And a lot of things don't meet that test. It's like artificial intelligence, robotics, those kinds of things. And so many things are captured that don't fit within China 2025. So those 3 key points are the tests that you have to meet. The one thing that I think is also important, and it has been a positive development, is that the lists 1 through 3, there was a threat that the administration was going to bounce those up from 25% to 30%, but luckily, because there was some kind of belief by the administration that there was in fact some progress with China, that got postponed.
So list 4A is currently at 15%. List 4B on December 15th will also go in at 15%. The exclusion process for 4A opens October 31st, and you have to have all your exclusions filed by January 31st.
One thing to keep in mind is that list 1 through 3, the exclusion process, has long since closed. A lot of people keep hoping that they can go back to something that has already closed. And it just goes to the point that the classification is so critical, because if they don't have the classification correct, then they may have thought they were on list 4A, where there was an exclusion process, but in reality, they were on a list that's already closed.
But that's not all bad news. It's possible that another company has filed an exclusion for similar products, and they'll be able to actually take advantage of exclusions granted to other companies.
As far as the USMCA goes, it's difficult to say exactly when we might see some kind of outcome here. I think the goal was really to have a vote by the U.S. this past summer, but because of all of the issues that are happening, including this impeachment inquiry, it could certainly be pushed off until 2020, which is really concerning. But even so, we still have the North American Free Trade Agreement in place. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still available for traders to use. And the USMCA is extremely similar. It's basically modeled after NAFTA. So there's a lot of similarity there.
And Canada has said that they will follow suit with whatever the U.S. votes. So if the U.S. votes it, then Canada's supposed to quickly vote in as well.
Mexico's already passed it, right?
Right, Mexico has already passed.
The outstanding concerns for USMCA involve labor, environmental, dispute resolution. Those are the primary things that I think we're having issues with, as well as pharmaceuticals. So the USMCA is the successor to NAFTA. The goal of the administration was to undo NAFTA and actually make it much better. Some people refer to it as NAFTA 2.0, but NAFTA stands for the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the members are Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. And it's one of the most successful trading agreements that the U.S. has. It's been in place for over 25 years. Billions of dollars in trade passed between these 3 countries. So the USMCA is a critical trade agreement for the U.S. and its trading partners. One thing that's really important about the intertwining between the USMCA or NAFTA actually, because the USMCA is not yet ratified by the U.S., is that a lot of companies are shifting their manufacturing to Mexico. They're taking Chinese inputs They're hoping the product is a Mexican origin product to avoid the Chinese tariffs, the Section 301. That gets into the country of origin. But what they're finding is that a lot of those products are still actually Chinese origin products, even if they meet the NAFTA rules of origin.
So at Braumiller Consulting Group, one of the things that we help importers with, or exporters for that matter, is to actually look at what the proper country of origin is to make sure that they actually are meeting the tariff shift requirements, which are within the trade agreements. Again, one of the biggest things is making sure that tariff classification is right. And I know I keep repeating tariff classification, but that is the foundation of many, many different things within customs. That's the starting point. So once you have the right classification, then you know what the rules of origin are, and then you can run through the analysis and see if the stuff even qualifies for the free trade agreement.
So the issue with the trade war with the EU has to do with these illegal subsidies that the U.S. brought in the form of a complaint before the WTO back in 2004. This has been something that's been working its way through the system for a really long time. This had nothing to do per se with the current administration. It's just something that the U.S. determined was illegal and wanted to pursue. And the decision by WTO was in the U.S.'s favor. It only came out recently. The tariffs began on October 18th, and they're split between 10 to 25%. 10% is on large civil aircraft, 25% is on really wonderful things like wine and cheese and produce, all the yummy things that we love, and it depends on the country in question.
And Adrienne, will there be any exclusion process for the...
I have no idea.
Yeah, so we haven't heard of any.
idea.
We have not heard of any exclusion process for the EU at this time.
No. I think for 25%, it would make sense that there would be. For 10%, I think the USTR would likely not do an exclusion process, but for 25% products, I think they would. So if anyone needs any help whatsoever with any of the things that we've talked about today, whether it's an exclusion request, whether they need help classifying their products, if they need any help determining how the country of origin should be determined, if they need any other help regarding trying to shift their goods to a NAFTA country, qualify their goods under the new free trade agreement, the USMCA, when and if it gets ratified, let's hope soon, certainly we can help.
We definitely cover many more topic areas than what we discussed here today. So anything related to import and export, trade compliance, we can definitely help you.
Braumiller Law Group and Braumiller Consulting. When it comes to global trade, relax. We've got you covered. Global trade compliance to us is just another day at the beach.